welcome. I'm Danny Darko, and today I'm coming to you from pretty much directly beneath a whole bunch of planets conjoining Pluto in Aquarius. But this story really got kicked off a couple days ago with the new moon in Capricorn on January 18th. So let's start there. New moons are always seed points of a new cycle, but this one is part of a much bigger series of astrological events. This is the first of two new moons ruled by Saturn as it nears its one and only exact conjunction with Neptune in Aries on February 20th. The second of these new moons is actually a solar eclipse in Aquarius that will happen just days prior to that conjunction. So let's take a look at what's going on with these transits throughout the waxing phase, what that might say about the archetypal activity in the astral atmosphere, and then explore what that might mean as a lived experience for each of us individually, so that we can hopefully make more informed decisions about what we want to do about it. My personal philosophy is that astrology gives us the archetypal menu, but we still have the capacity to choose what we want to order. I don't often use those exact terms to describe that concept, but they were in my notes, and as strange as they felt coming out of my mouth, it's just the best way to say it. The moon gets a lot of attention for obvious reasons during a new moon, but it's worth remembering that half of a new moon is actually the sun, which the moon is conjoining every new moon. Despite being ruled by Saturn, I find that the sun's journey through Capricorn actually does a really good job of outlining the nature of this sign. The tropical zodiac is lined up so that the sun enters the first degree of Capricorn on the winter solstice. This is the moment the sun just barely begins to start moving back upward from the low point it spent the previous 6 months descending towards. There's a new upward trajectory, but it's fighting against the inertia of the previous direction it was headed. Capricorn is a cardinal sign, so it initiates change, but it's cardinal Earth, so it's solid and weighty. And I think we just see that perfectly illustrated in the whole New Year's gym membership thing, where every Capricorn season, a bunch of us, myself included, decide to reverse the trajectory of the Jupiterian overindulgence of Sagittarius season's holidays, and we feel really positive about where we're headed for like a week or so, and then we just get reality checked by the Saturnine slog of putting in hard work every day for a reward that's somewhere off in the hypothetical distance. But Saturn rules long durations and rewards diligence. So if the sun wants to reach that radiant glory of its high point on the summer solstice, it's got to keep pushing forward 1 degree at a time through its low points in Capricorn. And so do we. The moon in Capricorn is actually pretty similar. It's as far away from its Cancerian domicile as it will ever be, which is probably where notions of it being debilitated, exiled, and in adversity originate in some late Hellenistic texts. I personally feel like these terms tend to color impressions of the moon in Capricorn in a little bit of an overly negative light, and even though they do reflect something of the quality of this placement, I don't often go in with that as like my first perspective on it. Particularly in this case, I think it's actually more useful to go in looking at what Saturn is up to as the ruler of Capricorn, which in this case is some very interesting once every 36 years behavior as it closes the final few degrees of gap with Neptune. It's also worth noting that Saturn and Neptune are in a pretty much exact sextile relationship to this new moon, which is at 28 degrees of Capricorn from their position at 27 and 29 Pisces, respectively, I think. I don't remember which one I said first, but in any case, sextiles are said to be of the nature of Venus, meaning harmonious, conciliatory, and cooperative. So in theory, this new moon is working towards the same ends as Saturn as it prepares for departure from Pisces, which is where it's been working toward this imminent conjunction with Neptune very hard since March of 2023, and alas, in classic Saturn fashion, will not succeed in meeting it in Pisces. It'll have to wait until 0 degrees of Aries. In any case, the Saturn-Neptune conjunction is hours worth of relevant information on its own, so we won't get too deep into that. Within the context of this specific new moon, and I think kind of as a general overall umbrella concept, I like the notion that Saturn conjoining Neptune is the death of an old and the birth of a new zeitgeist, meaning spirit of the time. I think this works really well because Neptune is spirit, Saturn is time, and it has that sense of a new quality of perception of the essence of the facts of our reality, alongside a legitimately new set of material circumstances, regardless of the new way we happen to be perceiving them at the end of all of this. Now, I think the murkiness of Neptune probably makes distinguishing cause and effect here totally impossible. They kind of happen simultaneously. Things will be very different on the other side of this transit, so we will see the world very differently. At the same time, us seeing the world very differently informs changes in the way things actually are. What is often uncomfortably clear is that this has already been underway throughout the duration of Saturn's time in Pisces, with the rise of AI, the breakdown of international relationship structures, and the general sense that the world we built our civilization on top of is just melting away beneath our feet. Isn't that fun? This is the dissolving of the old zeitgeist, which itself lines up pretty neatly with the post-Cold War expansion of neoliberal hegemony established at the last Saturn-Neptune conjunction under Saturn's jurisdiction in Capricorn, back no less on my birthday in 1989. These are massive, all-encompassing, kind of slow-moving changes that are happening on a global scale, but it's also playing out in some area or areas of your personal world as well, especially depending on how this transit interacts with your birth chart. I suspect the hazy, distorting qualities of Neptune will make predicting the specific nature of the new zeitgeist pretty difficult, but one way or another we'll have to see it to believe it, which is a pretty Saturn-Neptune concept in itself. That said, I think there are some features of this new moon that could give us some creative control in molding whatever mush we're left with at the end of all of this structural disintegration, at least within our own personal spheres of influence, however limited they may be. In my case, pretty significantly limited. But you know what? I think that's the lesson of this new moon. You got to just do it one step at a time. I'm doing my best here. Anyway. This new moon actually takes place at the very end of Capricorn, at the 28th degree. So within a couple of hours, the moon is already out of Capricorn and passing over Pluto at the 3rd degree of Aquarius. By the time of the corresponding full moon in Leo on February 1st, Venus, Mercury, the Sun, and Mars will have all done the same in that order. So this waxing phase of the moon is mirroring, which is a very lunar thing to do, the experience of the rulers of 8 out of 12 houses in all of our charts. Basically, this process has echoes pretty much across every aspect of all of our lives. The transits themselves, though, are taking place in Aquarius, so Aquarius is at the center of this. When I was first becoming acquainted with astrology, some signs made more intuitive sense than others, and in my humble opinion, Aquarius is one of those others. Aquarius, like Capricorn, is ruled by Saturn, but it's an air sign, and that just kind of didn't feel compatible with Saturn. Although it's fixed and that immovable quality makes intuitive sense with Saturn symbolism, I got stuck on air being flowing and intangible. And what I think really unlocked that for me was thinking of it as elemental air, which is symbolically the mental realm of thoughts, ideas, calculations, and the way we communicate them. All of which are much more familiar to us as potentially fixed, stubborn, structured, and contained within tradition and Saturnine boundaries in general. But I think Aquarius really starts to make intuitive sense when you work in the myth of Ganymede, who was born a mere mortal, but was made into the constellation of Aquarius by Zeus. To keep it brief, Ganymede was a young mortal tending sheep near Troy when he was recognized for his beauty by the gods and taken up to Mount Olympus to be Zeus's personal cupbearer. Pretty big deal in the ancient world. There, he was granted eternal youth and immortality and eventually put in the sky as the constellation of Aquarius. In some versions, Zeus's love of Ganymede is sexual, but in its original telling in Homer's Iliad, it's just because of an appreciation of his beauty. And later, Xenophon says Socrates said that Zeus loved him for his psyche, or mind, giving etymology behind his name as Ganu, taking pleasure, and Mede, the mind. So essentially saying Zeus took him up to Mount Olympus because he took pleasure in Ganymede's mental beauty. And I think this makes a lot more sense for Aquarius, which is really the context we're viewing this myth within. Ganymede is lifted above the physical and into the realm of the archetypal with the gods, where he gets to interact directly with them. Ganymede is the part of humanity that gets to live among the eternal, universal thought forms that shape the reality of the human experience. In other words, the human mind. So, given that, Aquarius could be said to pertain to the psychic structures that pre-exist and inform the shape of the human experience of reality as we experience it through our mental models. This is the same human experience of reality that Saturn and Neptune are actively dissolving and preparing to reconstitute, which is a process that Pluto excels at and is certainly participating in over the course of this lunar phase. Pluto has a really bad reputation in astrology, and not entirely without reason. It's a catalyst of dramatic, sometimes extreme, and often gruesome transformative processes. It's often compared to volcanic activity in its tendency towards eruptions of subsurface material. But just like volcanic activity, when the destruction is over, we're left with some of the most fertile soil on Earth. But I think for this particular series of Pluto transits, we should look to the Plutonian metaphor of maggots in a corpse, of course. It may be unsettling to look at, something we'd rather leave out of sight under the ground, but it's how the old dead things of this world get broken down into their constituent parts so that they can be put back into the ecosystem as pure potential for something new to grow out of. And I think that really contains the essential metaphor for this whole series of events, particularly because of how much that lines up with exactly what Saturn and Neptune are up to right now. As these planets encounter Pluto and Aquarius, this death and decomposition into pure potential is happening in the realm of thought forms and mental structures in Aquarius. Astrology is an art, not a science, so we can only speculate, but a few things jump out as pretty certain about the nature of the next 2 weeks as the moon continues waxing from its conjunction with the sun in Capricorn. For one, the outer planets are in a very rare configuration and up to some pretty serious shit right now. I don't think it's hyperbolic at all to say that the world as we know it is about to be entirely remade, and you don't have to be an astrologer to feel that that's happening. But this lunar phase in particular is where I see that giant long-term global scale process really tying into experiences of the more immediate and personal for us. This is our opportunity as individuals to accept that things are changing and take the time to really work at reflecting on what patterns of thinking and perceiving we've built our lives around. How does that inform the way we feel inside of ourselves and engage with the world around us? And are those assumptions really there to serve what's true about us as individuals, or are they just learned responses to the way things have seemed to be thus far? Because they really won't seem to be that way for very much longer. I'm almost positive of that. Either way, now would be the time to cut through the noise of whatever self-doubts, disappointments, aimlessness, and discouragement you may have been laboring under for the last few years of Saturn and Neptune in Pisces, and intentionally instigate a new paradigm within your own life built from the energy available to you when you dissolve those old ways of being. I would take some time between now and February 1st and really deconstruct what suppositions inform where your energy goes. Maybe even go house by house through your birth chart and just see what happens when you stop directing mental resources to those tried and true perspectives, some of which you may be really surprised to find you're even operating within. At the end of it, though, the point is to power down the old mental machinery for long enough to catch a glimpse of whatever is trying to emerge spontaneously right now from within you. Does an unexpected impulse start to call to you? Do you feel a new excitement for an interest you haven't previously taken seriously? Do your relationships feel any different without the filter of your habitual perspectives of them? Do behaviors that feel fun start to feel honestly a little self-destructive, and you can kind of predict where they're going to go awry? That would be very Pluto. But I think by far, most importantly, Can you find something worth doing as an end in itself, as opposed to being in service to a desired result, as almost everything we do is? Because if you can, even if everything else you've come to rely on melts away over the course of the near future, when the new way of things begins to coalesce, and it will do so around that central pillar of something transcendently true about you. Bigger forces are at work than we could possibly hope to control as individuals or even as a collective. But what we can do as Saturn and Neptune move into Aries is humbly and authentically engage with the source of divinity within ourselves, whatever that means to you. This new moon and the subsequent transits to Pluto are an opportunity to strip away the layers of crystallized mental patterns blocking us from hearing whatever that thing is that's calling us from within. As with most things Saturn gets involved in, I'm not saying this will be easy, but with dedicated and consistent commitment, regardless of triumph or failure in the short term, one way or another, it will end up being extremely worth it to heed whatever call is coming from inside your house right now. And on that note, I think that just about wraps up my attempt to do just that in making this my very first astrology video. Hopefully it wasn't too obvious that this was my first one. If the algorithm somehow dumped you here despite my absolute ineptitude in dealing with all things online, thank you for staying till the end. This really is me trying to take my own advice for once, and I'm trying to break down those crystallized mental structures of profound reclusiveness. I've been a fly on the wall of the astrological community for many, many years now. And when I took that time to kind of strip away those layers, like I said, I was very surprised that it actually kind of came to me in dream symbolism that me and my therapist analyzed. And it was kind of calling for like engaging with a larger community, which is something I have not previously considered to be necessary for me. So I'm trying to take my own advice seriously by developing this as a habit. So I hopefully will see you in the next video, assuming I don't just totally crash and burn at this, which I do sometimes do when it comes to maintaining a habit. But in any case, hopefully see you next time. Bye.